fiercest, most intelligent people I've met over the last several years are on this stage today, and you guys are getting it live. Will be carried out in the next month or two, also over my social media, and many thousands of people will watch it, but you're here seeing some of the people that I just think were incredibly important in preserving all of our freedoms. So I just do want to wait a moment, I suppose, for Deb Conrad. Just another moment. Pull up my notes. Maybe what we can do, oh, there she is. That's okay, it's all right. So, some of you, did a lot of you figure it out, pretty much right away, 2020, or did some of you come a little bit later? Anybody not figure it out kind of right away, feel right away it was a little off and figured out later? Yeah? What kind of turned it for you? Like what made it, what happened that made you say, maybe what they're saying isn't right? The steps. Oh, that's good. Thank you. So that's an interesting question I just started with, which is, did you know this right away, that what the government, the federal public health efficiencies were saying wasn't true? Many of you did. You might have felt it as an instinct, but some people didn't. And what made other people realize it was seeing other people up saying something out loud about it. If that is not the power of how important we each are in this fight, I don't know what is. So thank you. And that is a great lead into the first question I had, which I think now I'll ask it of Deb. You all know I'm a doctor and a lawyer, so it's interesting because I identify with all three of these people. But I suppose I sometimes like to say that my heart is as a doctor, maybe my brain, the intellect is more like a lawyer. But I can feel, even though you didn't say it, it is a bit of a heartbreak. What happened to us in 2020, 2021, if you had asked us the year earlier, is there any situation in which American doctors and nurses, allied health professionals, wouldn't put their patients first, like in the aggregate? We would have said, no, heck no, like doctors and nurses were very special, right? So it was absolutely a heartbreak. So I have a couple of questions for you. One, a follow-up with what the lady from the audience just said. What you said about the power of one, that's almost my mantra, like my fight. It is not up to me, it is not up to PA Conrad. It's up to each of us to push back. Will you just your own thoughts about that for just a couple of minutes? Because that is what we want to do. We want to make everyone feel that they can do something and that it's important.
So I think our life's purpose, many of us don't really know, right? I didn't know. I thought my life's purpose was to, be a medical provider, see patients in the hospital. But every day I would pray before I would go into the hospital and say, God, use me for your purpose. Whatever you need me to do, just have me do it. And I thought that's what I was doing until this happened. And he called me for a different purpose, right? I had never thought that I would be in this arena. It never. If you'd asked me years ago, I always stood up for things, but this was so unbelievably different for me. And I did it. I didn't think anything. It's not like people call me a hero and things like that. But really, I didn't have a choice, nor did I want a choice. I just followed what I knew was right. And I think for those of you out there, every single one of you, I hope and I believe, know right from wrong, right? And in our everyday lives, there are injustices going on, even what's minuscule in your community, in the places that you work, and stand up. Don't allow these injustices to happen, because that ripple effect and what you do reflects onto others. And my children who are in the audience today, I say to them all the time, be the change you want to see. If you're frustrated because, other young people are on their cell phones or vaping or whatever, don't vape, don't go on your cell phones. Even though you may look weird because you're the one not doing it, they're gonna say, hey, how come they're not doing it and we are? And they look happy. And I said, so you want to go out there with the light with you, and just every single one of us, as minuscule as sometimes we feel in this great big world, we can impact so much the people around us by how we behave, how we conduct ourselves, how we display our integrity for the things that we believe in. Because the truth is, we're all fighting each other, or that's what the media wants us to believe. But the truth is, we all want the same things. Really, when it comes down to it, fundamentally, we want the same things. And we have to stop fighting with each other and try to be the solution to facilitate change and bring us back to just loving each other and getting back to respecting each other and fighting for what's right and what's just.
I want to encourage everybody that the power of one cannot be underestimated. When I first came out in 2020, first of all, before I became known, for the few months before that, I was essentially finding doctors one by one on social media. I knew I couldn't be the only doctor who was awake, and I was just finding them. And then I thought, well, how can we bring all this information to the American people? And that's what led us to stand on the steps of the Supreme Court. But it was really just one person. Like, it was me, not that there weren't others, but it was the same way Deb Conrad was one person who just kept pushing. That was me as well. And later, people would ask me how many frontline doctors were there, and I would say for the first 3 years, or 4 years even, I really never answered because we became very large. But it all started with one, and honestly, that video that you all watched, or some of you, there was about 20 or 25 of us standing on the steps of the Supreme Court. It's a nice number, but there's 1 million doctors in America. It's nothing compared to the million. So, wow, we have so much evidence that one person can make a difference. She's literally changing, starts with her hospital system, but I can assure you that other hospital systems are looking at it and are nervous, and they're gonna be nervous when the next time comes around not to comply. Many whistleblowers have different stories, and my next question is going to be for Deb's attorney, Mr. Friedman. And the reason I really want to point this out to the audience, but I know how hard it is legally to come up with a case that wins. I also know you're not at the finish line, I understand that, but it's really difficult to come up with the winning legal theory. When we were bringing a lot of lawsuits in 2021 especially to stop vaccine mandates, I can tell you they're really difficult to win, partly because the judges give too much deference to the executive branch, like the FDA and the CDC, but also, the judges are infected with the same malaise Americans are. It's, I don't, want to think differently or creatively or out of the box or pay too much attention and deviate, right? So it's very, very difficult to come up with winning legal theories on these matters. So Deb's story is particularly intriguing because she used, in a way, you're a whistleblower, I get it, Key Tom, but she used a law that's on the books. Many of us outside the system were saying, the law that you have isn't functional, it's not working right, blah, blah, blah. She's like, no, the law, the way it's written, is being violated. So she had a whole different creative outlook on how to stop it, right? I understand the difference, and it was creative. So what I wanted to ask for you, you had a long history understanding the False Claims Act, but I know Deb talked to other lawyers before she talked with you, before you started working together. How difficult was it to come up with the kind of legal theory that would lead you to be in a positive position?
Well, is this on?
If not, borrow Deb's.
Is it? Oh, that's on. In some ways, it wasn't difficult because I know that you have to take a broader view of time and history, and I knew once I saw you on stage talking about what was really going on, once I realized I wasn't alone in thinking that this was tyranny, that this was going to harm people, I knew that the time would show people like Deb Conrad and Brooke Jackson were in the right, and that they were there to help us. But the judges in the beginning were too scared. They were caught up in the same psychological problems. I knew a lot of good doctors, like Aaron Cariotti, who was one of the first to file a lawsuit to try to stop the mandates. They operated out of good heart and good intention. They thought that if they just stood for what was right, that they would win. And if they weren't to win, they would appeal. And the truth is that if you jumped in too quickly, You were caught up in a wall that wouldn't let you succeed. But fortunately, in my cases, especially False Claims Act cases, you can take the long view and you can start to realize where it's gonna go in the future. In some ways, we're not so much propelled by our past, we're drawn to the future that we're gonna play. And so I felt like all I needed to do was talk to people, understand what the evidence was, draw out the complaints, and be patient, and counsel my clients and my co-counsel to be patient. And ultimately, we would find whatever truth we would need to win our cases.
So maybe the better question is for Deb, which is how many lawyers did you talk with before you found Mr. Friedman?
I actually talked with, I never got to a lawyer because I never got beyond the person that answered the phone at the law firm. Because as soon as I mentioned it was something related to COVID, we can't help you. So it was probably about 9 law firms that I called. And I had actually seen Warner Mendenhall on Steve Kirsch's show one night, and I had done a couple of podcast shows with Steve with the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. And he was on there with Robert Barnes, who are representing Brooke Jackson. And I said, you know what? This guy is just kind of speaking to me. There was something about him that I just said, I know he's the right one. And again, it's a God thing, I swear. It's like he put me in these places. And so I sent him a little note. I reached out to his email and I just, hey, this is a small fry PA from Batavia, New York, and I've got this situation here, and can you call me? And he called me. And we spoke for a while on the phone trying to figure out the situation and if I had what was needed to bring this case forward. And it's a funny story, but I did, and we've been working together ever since.
I'm bringing these things up because, you know, in retrospect, it looks a little bit easier than it is, but it's actually incredibly difficult. But if you know that you're right, you have to keep pushing forward because there are other people out there, you just haven't met them yet, who have the expertise you need to bring the thing forward that you need. So I want to encourage everybody in your life, if you know it's right, you be persistent, and there will be somebody whose lane this exactly fits. And it's a matter of finding that exact fit, which is a great way to introduce and work my next question for Lawson Pedigo. Lawson, I've known for 4 years. You know, kind of joke, I say I hardly make a move anymore without talking to Lawson. He's just an unbelievably high quality, excellent attorney. And he ends up being involved in a lot of frontline doctors' issues on a kind of a very top level strategy level. And as you heard this morning when he spoke, you know, he also, like Mr. Friedman, takes a long view, you know. So when we went up to fight against the California Medical Board, we wanted to succeed. So we have a law firm that we're working with, very freedom-minded people, but I definitely needed Mr. Pedigo to help get us over the finish line. And you and I really bonded over the tyranny that we're seeing. It happens to be in the medical space, but it's just tyranny. Medical tyranny is still just tyranny. And we both felt that protecting physicians' ability to speak freely is critical, because if they can block doctors from speaking, think about that, by the way, it is not just medical speech. Doctors are licensed by the state. So how do they stop doctors from speaking? They threaten their license. So if they say to this person over here, a licensee, doctor, but a licensee, hey, if you say these words, we're gonna pull back your license. My question to you is, physicians in one category, but what about all the other people who have licenses? Restaurant owners, hairdressers, you know, people who own dog shops that need licenses to run them, liquor stores. All of these people didn't stand up, mainly because their licenses were threatened. There was a lot more people that would have. So that's what they did to the doctors, and specifically in the doctor lane, they took liberty that was not available to them, usurpation. So I wanted to ask you, Lawson, do you understand usurpation now? Kind of? Okay. You've done other freedom cases. Like, how do you feel medical tyranny fits in with maybe like your life's work in terms of freedom fighting, freedom cases? Because we're all immersed in it and bonded into medical tyranny, but again, it's just tyranny. So this was this the first kind of medical tyranny that you jumped into?
It was, I think so, yeah, I think so. And by Dr. Gold standing up, and we filed our federal lawsuit first to say you're attacking her license. And under the due process clause, she has a property right. Once that license is granted, the government just can't willy-nilly take it from you. So we had to sue in federal court. I put that complaint up there. Our federal judge said, well, let's see what happens with the medical board. So now we beat them and we're gonna go back to the federal court because you only have a smaller remedy by beating the California Medical Board. We get some of our costs back. But like Dr. Gold said, the reason they went after her was to teach everybody else, this is what happens when you stand up. And so now we have a principle firmly established that unless there's misconduct, a criminal conviction that's substantially related to your fitness to be a physician, you can't take a license over that. And they'd never done, because we would say in 157 years or whatever it was, you've never done this to anybody. It's not a statistical quirk that she's the one person who said the medical board is run by somebody who's not fit to run it. That's why they took this action. I mean, it's not a random thing. They were going after her. So if you really take a step back, the irony is when she got, I guess, fired or departed ways with her first hospital for committing the grievous sin of healing somebody, we'll teach you. But what did they do? By going too far, if you think about it, take that thread all the way through, she said, wait a minute, this isn't right. And so America's Frontline Doctors has started. So by government overreach, by beating up her hospital to come down on her for using effective drugs that Big Pharma couldn't make money off of, they ended up creating AFLDS, which has now been supported, which gave Dr. Gold the financial ability to take on the medical board. So it's interesting how what they did that was wrong created the monster that they couldn't put back in the box like that. But now we have a great principle that says, if you get to speak freely. If they're going to take your license in California, it's because you had to do something wrong that's substantially related to your fitness to practice medicine. And by the way, we're not saying that all laws are bad. There are some doctors who have been disciplined and had their license taken. They absolutely should take their license. If anything, I think the California Medical Board is way too light on that. You've got some of your former colleagues that you did this, it's sexual misconduct, it's all kinds of things that they could only do because they were doctors and they don't get anything. So we need laws, don't get me wrong on that. But the problem is once there's a law on the books, it can be abused, and that's what happened to her. But now Gold versus Medical Board has got that, has that principle firmly established that they can't go that far in how they've done that. You're asking about other places, the restaurant owner with Tony Roman. Yeah, we're saying that's not what OSHA's for. OSHA's when, it's a dangerous place. You're around heavy equipment. People die. You're in a meat processing plant or something. That's what OSHA's for, not to regulate a restaurant with 12 employees that don't even wear masks and everybody likes to go there to eat and have wedding proposals. It's an iconic place there, this restaurant. But he, took on Governor Newsom and said, you can't do this to me. And so they said, we're coming after your license. So if he doesn't fight back, and hopefully we get the same outcome as Dr. Gold. Now, they only went after her license, which is a big deal for a physician, but they're trying to take his livelihood because if he loses that, they've tried to take all his money so he can't have working capital to run a restaurant. But if you don't stand up to that, then, you're going to end up with the kind of culture and legal system that you do not want to live under. So it does come down to individuals like that. You said the power of one. That's why I was quoting the minor prophet, Zechariah. Do not despise the small things. And for people that are, of faith here, when that's your God-given ability, and probably, Deb, with you, what happened is when you say, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, don't be surprised that God puts you in a position where you get to back your beliefs like that. And if you think you can live a compromised life, but when it's game time and something's on the line, you're going to all of a sudden have integrity, it just doesn't work that way. So what people don't know about Dr. Gold, and I'll just say this about her, is when we were putting on character evidence, here's when she worked in the emergency room. not a single complaint ever. And she worked in really hard places in LA. I mean, dead body or bullets, gunshot victims kind of thrown out of moving cars that she'd have to take. And then on the weekends, every once in a while would go work at Indian reservations, the Navajo, where they had no medical care just because she wants to help people. That was laboring away. Nobody knew about it. That's just her living a life of integrity, saying, I want to help people. Now, that's the kind of person who, not surprisingly, gets put in the situation she was put in, but she didn't just become a lioness overnight. She had lived a life like that. And so live that kind of a life.
Yeah, one
Speechless.
of the,
Speechless, what?
Lawson's right, though. You have to live a life of integrity, because otherwise, step by step, you're silencing yourself, and it's the self-censorship that leads to so many people not speaking up when they see something is wrong. It's been very fun for me over the last 5 years when I have the opportunity to ask some people that I've met along the way, like, how they were prior to this. So I remember I asked you that, Deb, once. I said, how were you prior to this? And her answer is just like she has spoken today, that, you said in passing, well, I stood up for what was right. So I was the same way. I stood up for what was right, but it was never on the national stage. It was always really just for the person in front of you, which is I'm taking as what you did. But again, it doesn't come out of nowhere. When I looked at my ER physician colleagues, not that they were affirmatively going out of the way to hurt people, not that, but when it was more convenient, for example, to give this medicine or be hospitalized instead of go home, whatever, they didn't take the high integrity position of, no, what does this patient in front of me need? Like, it's those micro decisions that I want to impress upon you that build up over time, that then when you're presented with a flagrantly unethical scenario, like Deb was, she's like, no, I can't do that, it's unethical. She's fine-tuned to ethics because she hasn't deadened herself with micro decision day in and day out where she let her sense of ethics leave her. Those were the people who stood up. When you go back and you talk to the early frontline doctors and you talk with them, it turns out they all had that quality in common. They spoke up. It wasn't famous, it wasn't anything, but they had a developed sense of strength inside themselves of what is right and wrong, and they weren't going to deviate from that just because it became harder. And we all face that. I have
While she's looking for that question, so there's I think there's a verse, Song of Solomon. It talks about, watch out for the little it's the little foxes that spoil the vineyard. Or there's a parable in the New Testament about, if I can trust you with the little things, I can trust you with greater things. So exactly what Dr. Gold's saying, it's those, what are these little decisions in my life where I am with my employer? And then, nobody wants to have to be in the eye of the storm, but that might be what you're called to do, but get ready for that.
We've never really spoken exactly of this reason, but that's exactly it. Like, why was it me? Why was it Deb Conrad? That was the exact reason, is because we didn't allow ourselves to get numb to all the little ethical quandaries in your day-to-day life. It's everywhere. Now that we've spoken about it, you'll see it everywhere. You'll see it at your work, you'll see it with your families, your social groups, and it is incumbent upon you. And by the way, you'll be happier for it because you'll see that you were self-censoring. And this was tremendously people of faith. I mean, it was essentially people of faith. I remember early on, one of our original frontline doctor was Dr. Joseph Latipo, who went on to become the Surgeon General of Florida. But when this all was starting and we were organizing our first educational summit, we weren't political. He said to me, well, could we invite, he was a professor at UCLA then, and he said, well, UCLA could pay for this trip for me to come out and speak, but it has to be bipartisan. It can't just be one side. And I was a couple months ahead of him in terms of my understanding of the landscape. I said, absolutely, we invite Democrats. 100% we invite Democrats. But the only ones who showed up were people who were politically conservative. And of the politically conservative people, it was the people of faith. It was the people of faith. It was the people that believed in God. I didn't know that at the outset. I didn't know that's how it would be, but that is exactly how it is. Mr. Friedman, you said something that reminded me of something I say a lot. What you said is that we can still stand up. The way I say it is I say, we don't yet live in China. Like, you can see that the False Claims Act is a law on the books, very robust law, and we do have the ability to fight back. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because I do think sometimes we have felt, oh, what's the use in saying anything? And, can't fight back. And I'm always telling people, no, you absolutely can fight back. They'll attack us, but we can fight back. What is your attitude on that? I mean, you've been doing the False Claims Act now for decades, I guess. So you've seen people fight back in civil, constitutional rights. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that once you incorporate an understanding of what you think is right, and you act according to your principles, the decisions that you need to make, the tough decisions, become fairly easy. You're not going to compromise your own integrity in order to win a case, in order to make a point, in order to make a buck. The consequences fall where they fall. And my view on the law is a little bit different than a lot of other people. That a lot of people think it's just sort of a mechanistic thing. Either you have the power in the moment or not. But I think that a sense of legitimacy controls even when you don't even see it. So the more you adopt and influence what is and isn't legitimate, the more powerful you become. And so, yes, the False Claims Act, the Constitution, we don't live in China, or we don't live in a place where we have fascism as the rule of law. We see fascism because there's all this overreach, but that overreach is failing. And we don't know it sometimes. We fear it, we worry about it, and we sometimes talk ourselves into thinking that they're gonna win, that they've already winning, that they have won. But in fact, truth wins. And whether we call it God or whether we just call it time, there is a future, and the future is something that humanity holds. And it's and so once you stand against this anti-humanistic approach that fuels fascism, and that may be the goal for fascism, you realize it is the power of one, but it's the power of truth and the power of all the community of humanity that believes in the one. And so it empowers you much more than you think.
I think, people inside, you remember the picture, 25 years ago in Tiananmen Square, the man who was standing and holding back, what do you call them? Tanks. They were tanks. So I think, speaking for myself, maybe some of you, in my mind, that's often how it feels. I understand it may not look to you about my life, from the outside, because I'm a strong person, but in my mind, I'm like, am I just that one person holding back the tanks? And I want to say it's not. They're telling you and they're trying to scare you into thinking that's what it is, but it's not. That picture, Tiananmen Square soldier, citizen, is scrubbed from the internet. It's not visible in China because Google allows China to censor. Now, we saw terrible censorship, and we still do have tremendous bias. Elon Musk buying X changed things enormously. It can't even be described how big it was. But even, we are not living in China. I keep falling back on that because they want to fool you into thinking one person doesn't matter. It's totally not true. That person has to be right? So you have to be factually correct. You have to be strong. The litigant has to be strong. Deb Conrad has to be strong. I have to be strong. You have to find the lawyers that are just like you in their zone. By the way, that's a very difficult task, to find the right lawyer with the expertise and the right backbone. But if you have those variables, you can win, and you probably will win. That's what I really want to impress upon you, is that we really don't live in a system where you can't win anymore. That's huge. We fought a really long time in California. This took 3 years. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It was, in many ways, it was almost a black and white case. I mean, the medical board overreached. It was absolutely ridiculous, and it still took 3 years. So you have to be strong. You have to find the right fighters. Turning back to the medical, I have an interesting kind of question for Deb. So, because I want to demonstrate for everybody how big an issue this is. This isn't an issue for Dr. Gold. It's not an issue for Deb Conrad. This is where we're going. And Deb, I don't even know if you know this. I suspect that you being you probably do. But this is going to be very interesting for the audience to hear. Let me pull this up. Okay. So all of medical practice revolves around the billing system that the government has set up into place. It's called the ICD-10. Nothing happens. You can't order lab tests or x-rays or pharmacy. Nothing happens without your ICD-10 code. Everything revolves around the ICD-10 code. So this is what's really, there's something like 10,000 ICD-10 codes, which is, by the way, over the top ridiculous complexity, but that's what it is. Nothing can happen in the system, it doesn't move. It's like a car without gas. You need the ICD-10 code. I'm bringing this up because I think it was about a year and a half ago, maybe. So they created an ICD-10 code for not being COVID vaccinated, which doesn't sound so bad because I'm sure they have an ICD-10 code for not having the flu shot because you had a bad allergic reaction and then you couldn't take the flu shot. So that would be a proper thing to code because you would want to know that you should not take the flu shot because you collapsed into anaphylactic shock when last time you had the flu shot, right? So it's a reasonable medical data point, you should say. Except when you find out that there is a COVID, an ICD-10 code for not taking the COVID shot for non-medical reasons. So let's explain that. If you don't take the COVID shot for medical reasons, because let's say you took the first one and you had a stroke, right? You should chart this person had a stroke when they had the COVID shot, and therefore you would, and we don't want that to happen again. So it's almost like an allergy. Let's say you should definitely have that code. You can't take it for non-medical reason, for a medical reason. But what is the purpose of the government having a code for not taking the shot for non-medical reason? Why in the world does the government need that data point? And it's a very specific code. It's the Z, if the patient explicitly refused the COVID vaccine for non-medical reasons, Z2821. And they ask also if you didn't take it for religious reasons. So what this reminded me of, two things I want to say. One, as far as I know, there are not codes like this for other shots. I had never heard of this before. And it reminded me when, starting about 10 or 15 years ago, the powers that be started requiring me as an ER doctor to ask families in the ER about guns in the home, right? Now, all this stuff sounds really benign and, oh, it's possible a child could get injured by a gun. That is technically true. Way more children die from swimming and drowning accidents than gun accidents. But we were not being told to ask that. So I recognized this about 15 years ago, that doctors, PAs, can become the widgets in the machine for the government to track data that maybe you don't want to have tracked. Were you familiar with this COVID ICD-10 code?
Absolutely, because in the VAERS reporting situation, they don't have a code for adverse event to a COVID vaccine like they do for the childhood vaccines. They have a code for adverse event to a viral vector vaccine or something like that we can document that they had Guillain-Barré or whatever from a flu shot. But for the COVID vaccines, there's nothing. So I was well aware of that because I was trying to find the code to document in their medical chart that they had an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine. And there is no such code. So what I've been doing is putting it under the adverse reaction to a viral vector vaccine, which is incorrect. It's not correct because that's not what the COVID vaccine is. But I have no other option in order to document their side effect.
So I didn't know Deb was going to say this. Isn't that interesting? So that's like a whole nother level of censorship. Like the thoughts don't even exist. They're not real because there's not even a way to document it. There's not a way. And that also reminds me why this is a fun conversation. In the ER, when I look back on my days, I'm 25 years in the ER. I have a lot of experience. So I have a lot of experience if somebody, you've heard of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and of course people come to the ER when there's any kind of catastrophic event. So I was the first line responder for a SIDS child. I mean, that was just part of my work as an ER physician. We never asked about vaccines. Now, perhaps it sounds like a neutral statement if you're not in the health professions, but we ask about everything. Everything, what did you eat and what medicines? We certainly ask about what medicines you take. What medicines did you take? Anything new in the environment? And we never asked, nor were we ever taught to ask. It's not as though we were not complying. It was just not a thought in our head. That's censorship, right? I didn't even know to have that thought because there'd been so much propaganda teaching me how to think. That's why I keep telling you, don't censor yourself. There's enough propaganda that's already kind of censoring you. So we were never even thought to ask that.
It's interesting. I was in a couple years ago, but I had defending somebody. There was a big EPA lab fraud case. It was a criminal case, and so I was defending a chemist and the thing. We had a Chinese doctor who was one of the defendants. And so there was like 14 defendants. It was just a zoo in that federal courtroom. And so the Chinese doctor that was indicted needed an interpreter. So at one of the first hearings, the judge would say, I'm going to read the indictment. Now, this is just an indictment. If the government doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt what they've alleged, then you'll be acquitted. And the one time the interpreter had to, put his hand up, and so that's one of our best judges, Judge Fitzwater, he said, yes? And the Chinese interpreter said, we don't have a word for acquitted. Yeah, so we're laughing. He's like, what did I say? He said, yeah, if you're charged, you're guilty. We don't have acquittals here. So we're talking about China and data they don't collect. Acquittals is a record they don't, that's not a statistic kept in their justice system.
So again, that's proof that we still can win in our system. And and it also takes a lot of, I do think it takes a lot of people fighting the same battle, partly because you become a role model so other people then stand up. That's my favorite line to hear when people come up to me and say, oh, you gave me courage to stand up. But it's true, you're alerting the world that other people can stand up, but you don't know which push is going to bring that wall down. So we brought vaccine lawsuits, Aaron Siri brought vaccine lawsuits, you had the False Claims Act. So all of this together wakens the audience, the observers watching. I think we both knew that the shots were garbage. I didn't really define winning as pulling the shots from the market. I defined winning as slowing the process enough till enough people realized it, right? So that's exactly what happened, quite frankly. Nobody talks about it anymore. So you maybe change your definition of winning. So I didn't really get bummed I was mad that the judges weren't reading our work. It's frustrating. You work really hard on this. But I just always knew that over time, if we could slow them up, the truth would come out. So you can't be too discouraged if you don't win on that day, because it really is setting a series of tasks into motion that usually, if you're right, in America, usually would result in a win. So you might just be a cog in that wheel. So you should not be discouraged by that at all. So
Dr. Gold, that's what I was, in my presentation at the end, that slide, the Overton window, is because when you do these individual acts or your attitude and you say, well, this is what I stand for, that starts changing attitude just across the country in the sphere where you live out your life. Well, they pick federal judges from the community. So the more that they recognize that's another point of view because it's out there, that starts indirectly and over time, it starts affecting where we get our judges. And if you have a judge who has very left-leaning tendencies and they think there's not another argument or there's not 50% of America feels this other way, they're going to really be unburdened to take the, really drastic actions that will take your rights. So that's why what you do on an individual basis, it's don't despise that small thing. That starts the groundswell that affects how judges, where they come from, and how federal judges are going to think what the body politic's going to put up with.
And even for the different judges, they might start out in one view, and then their view can change over time, despite the fact that you think whatever they said before locked them in. And that's why you have to sometimes plant the seed and wait for the community to raise its consciousness and leave open the doors so that you're not closing off the opportunity for that judge to grow. That recently happened to us, and we hoped it's going to happen again in the future, where we had a judge express views about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. And at one point, and it was only so many months ago, and then more recently, he just suggested that the defendant should be able to identify people who at least identified themselves as being injured by the vaccines. And so it becomes a growth opportunity for everybody.
Thank you for that. And we'll just have a little closing remark from Deb Conrad, and also to just mention your website again, which is the best name. But any kind of last words for people? Is that too much pressure?
Again, I just encourage the public to follow this lawsuit. I think it is going to be. I'm very confident because again, it's been about truth the entire time. And so I am very confident that we will be successful in the end. It may take some time, but I'm excited about the discovery process. I'm excited to work with my attorneys, and I'm excited to work with Rochester Regional Health and discover, you know, this whole process and what really went on behind the scenes. And because it's a public lawsuit, I mean, the public can follow this. Even when we have our hearings in the Buffalo Federal Court, I had many people in the community that came and sat and watch the proceedings. And I think the judges like that, right? They like to see, years ago, that's what used to happen all the time. People were very involved in their community in these cases. So I encourage everyone to follow this case, because this affects all of us, right? Because this is part of medical freedom. Vaccines are at the forefront right now of everything that's in the media, and there's a lot of changes coming down the road. And if we can't choose what we put into our bodies, and then we're suppressing people who are trying to report side effects for these products, that's just so fundamentally wrong, and it's so against the ethics and the oath that we took as medical providers. That's why for me it was just so wrong. I said, no, this is an untested product, and we're putting it into babies and people, and we're lying to them and telling them things that aren't true. And then you're going to suppress when I'm trying to report these safety events. That is just counter to everything that I trained and learned. And if that means that I can no longer work in that sector, like I said, I don't want to work. I don't want to work there. And I think more healthcare workers especially need to stand up, especially when they see these injustices going on, because that's not what we went into medicine for. But we're being systemically kind of pushed to do these types of things. And we, as a collective group of medical providers, all of us need to stand up for you, because it affects all of us and our families.
I want to thank everybody for being on the stage. Every one of you is fierce, and it's always enjoyable and fun to have us in conversation. Mr. Friedman, P.A. Conrad, and Mr. Patago, thank you so much. Thank you.